The Lima summit has wrapped and the object of regime change is staying put for the time being. Well, let's discuss what Canada and its partners have done. Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland's in the studio. Nice to have you with us.
Great to be with you, Don.
Is Maduro any steps closer to being kicked out of office today as a result of this meeting, you think?
Well, as you know, Canada had already recognized Juan Guaido as the interim president of Venezuela,
right.
And that's on the basis of the fact that he is the leader of the National Assembly, which is the sole remaining body in Venezuela that has democratic legitimacy.
Right.
What we did do is the Lima Group agreed that going forward, Venezuela and the representatives of interim President Juan Guaido will be full participants in the Lima Group. So we won't just be talking about them, we will be talking with them. And I think that's a really important step. This really is, it's about the people of Venezuela reclaiming their democracy. And I have to say, in my own riding in downtown Toronto, people have come up to me who are Canadians, but from Venezuela, and have talked to me about how important this issue is for them and for their families. I talked to some people just that I met randomly at a school in downtown Toronto on Friday. This is a really important issue, and I'm glad that we're able to play a part.
You called for the military to switch sides, the Venezuelan military leaders, and there are some signs that at least some generals are calling for that to happen. Are you getting any new intelligence that suggests that's starting to happen in any meaningful way?
Yeah, so what the Lima Group did as a group is we called on the military and the military leadership to recognize Juan Guaido as interim president because he is the only one with that democratic legitimacy. As Juan Guaido has said, it is going to be really important what the military leadership does. We've already seen some coming out and recognizing legitimacy of Juan Guaido. And we very much would like to encourage more of them to do that and to know that in so doing, they will be joining the international democratic community. We have now today, I didn't check my BlackBerry right before coming in here, but the last time I checked, it was 38 countries around the world that had recognized Juan Guaido as the interim president of Venezuela. And these are our partners from around the world. This is countries like the UK, like France, like Germany, our partners in the Americas.
I'm curious, there was a protest. I don't know how that happened. Was there a problem with an accredited journalist that was masking as a protester? Because I know there's a Russian journalist that's saying he couldn't get accredited for this summit, and they're putting a bit of a stink.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how those protesters got there, but the fact that they were there, obviously we need to be careful about accreditation and so forth, but the fact that they were there didn't bother me at all. I take that as an example of how Canada really is a democratic country. And I think that it's okay for Canadians to disagree with their government. It's one of the things that makes us a democracy. And I think that's something that we demonstrated today.
And you didn't let a Russian in. Why not?
I am not, I didn't personally look at each person who is accredited. What I will say is, as you know very well, Don, there are some countries in the world whose media organizations are not independent media doing the job, whether they agree with our position or not, but of asking questions, but who use sort of so-called media organizations really as puppets of and fronts for their governments. And that's something that we need to not be naive about, be conscious of. It's something that my colleague Corinna Gould, I think, talked about in talking about securing our own elections. So we need to be careful about that, and we are.
Let's talk about the economy. It's a shambles in Venezuela, as you know, but it seems from this statement today, you're trying to put the economic pincers around it and say choking it off from international transactions. Is it mostly done that already? Haven't most countries severed except for Russia and China? And you're not going to convince them through this statement today.
Well, there was the important step recently around Venezuelan oil sales taken by the U.S. I think what is happening in terms of Venezuela on the economic front, I would characterize as three things. First of all, it is important to maintain the economic pressure on the Maduro regime and to ensure that the Maduro regime does not have access to the assets of the Venezuelan people. Venezuela is in terrible economic shape, and the Venezuelan people are going to need those assets to rebuild when they are able to reestablish their democracy. So that is point one. Point two, and something we discussed a lot and to which Canada made a significant contribution that the Prime Minister announced today, is humanitarian support for the people of Venezuela.
Yeah.
The Lima Group has talked about establishing a corridor to support the people of Venezuela. People are dying. People are dying of malnutrition and for lack of medicine. We want to help. The world wants to help. The Maduro regime is not allowing that aid in, and we need to work on that. And then the final thing, which actually I found very positive, is we heard a presentation from representatives of Juan Guaido and their partners about the plan they have for the day after democracy is restored to Venezuela, the concrete, specific, very fast steps they're going to take to rebuild Venezuela's economy. And I was so happy to hear the very specific, detailed work they are doing. It gave me a lot of hope.
He doesn't necessarily stick around, right? He's a transitional president. He could, or he might step aside. Do you have any doubts about which way that's going to go?
Well, no, that's a really important question, and that is part of what is lending legitimacy to this whole process. It's really important. We are not picking sides here in Venezuela, and in supporting Guaido as interim president, this is not about picking sides. This is about opening the door to a free and transparent election. I
don't get you enough on the show, so I got to ask you a quick question about China. China!
You astonish me, Don.
I know. You know, we still have 2 detainees. We still are concerned about a Canadian on death row. Nothing seems to be happening. Is something happening? Like, is there progress being made to secure their release? Anything closer on the Huawei decision? Give us the best update you can.
Well, a significant step was that our diplomats had consular access, had consular meetings with Michael Kovrig, Michael Spavor. That's important, and I do want to thank our diplomats in Beijing who are extremely qualified and very, very dedicated. Important to remember that many of them know Michael Kovrig personally, right? He's a colleague,
right.
And they are working so, so hard. I think also the Canadian efforts to continue to build a coalition of support for Michael Kovrig, for Michael Spavor. That work continues. Actually, the Lima Group meeting today was an opportunity for me to talk to many of our partners. And I won't say who said this because I'll let them say it themselves, but one of our key international partners said, you know, seeing Canada stand up for human rights and democracy in Venezuela is a reminder of why we need to support you when you talk about human rights and your Canadians in China. So, you know, there is a consistent Canadian position that is winning us support. A very important development last week was that Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, came out and spoke out in support of Michael Kovrig, of Michael Spavor, and we're grateful for that.
Okay. Thank you, Chrystia Freeland. Always a pleasure having you on.
Thank you, Don.
Hope to
Always
see you
nice
soon.
to talk to you.
All right.